And another guest. And we are live on YouTube, just FYI.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Ralston, we're right at 9 a.m., but should I wait another minute or two? Because we're still missing a couple people.
I think we can wait just another minute. I think, first of all, do we have a quorum? Second of all, I think it's Commissioner Seal, Chief Milligan, I think.
Yep.
And-
Mr. Dillinger
Right.
and Mr. Ongst is coming on.
Mr. Dillinger will not be making it. He
Okay.
went into the hospital late last night
Oh, no.
Oh,
up in Brooksville. So we will wish him well with an infection, he said. So
And we're still waiting on Mr. Ongst, I believe. And one more guest, John Gilberto.
Let's wait
Okay.
another minute or two before we begin introductory. Do we have a quorum, Beth?
well, let's see.
Do we have our finance committee quorum? Do we?
That's what I was going to ask, is I don't believe we have our,
No.
we need one more for a finance committee quorum.
All right. Do you want me to text Karen?
That would be nice.
Let me do
Oh, there
that.
she is right there.
Okay.
Great.
Oh, wonderful. Now we have a finance committee quorum, and then 2, 3, 5, 6, and we have a board quorum.
Why don't we begin with opening comments?
Okay, with the opening script.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay.
So good morning. I'm Laura Peel, JWB Director of Information Technology, and I'm going to be your technology moderator for this morning. Board members, I want to take a roll call to verify that audio communication is working. Please say present to indicate that you can hear me. Now, please mute your device until you are called on to speak. Susan Ralston,
Present?
Butler. And you are, let me unmute him. Rick Butler,
present.
Bernie McCabe,
Present.
Karen Seal,
Present. Present.
Jim Milliken, and I don't believe he is on. Judge Moore,
Present.
Brian Ongst. No? Dr. Grego,
Present.
thank you. Now I will turn it over to CEO Beth Houghton.
Good morning. I am Beth Houghton, CEO of the Juvenile Welfare Board. This regular Finance Committee meeting and then board meeting of the Juvenile Welfare Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Florida Governor DeSantis' Executive Order 20-69 of March 20th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency throughout the state of Florida, given the outbreak of the novel coronavirus COVID-19. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus and reduce risk of COVID-19 illness, we have been advised and directed by the state to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order EO 20-69 suspends the requirement of the Sunshine Law to have all meetings in a specific public place and to require a quorum to be present in person. EO 20-69 has been extended by EO 20-112 and EO 20-114. These executive orders posted on JWB's public notices website allows public bodies to utilize communications technology to conduct its business. For this meeting, JWB is convening via Zoom webinar or telephone conference posted on our website, which clarifies how the public may join and participate if they wish. A public meeting notice was published in the Tampa Bay Times on May 6th as required by Section 189.015 of the Florida statutes. Please note that the meeting is being recorded on Zoom webinar and YouTube Live. Also, that some attendees are participating by telephone conference. Participants are advised that people may be listening who do not provide comment, and those persons are not required to identify themselves. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording and will become part of a public record of the Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County. Laura Peel, JWB Director of Information Technology, will serve as the technology moderator of the remote participation by JWB committee and board members, JWB staff, presenters, and the public.
Okay. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Susan Ralston,
Yes.
Rick Butler,
Yes.
Bernie McCabe,
Yes.
Commissioner Seal,
Here.
Chief Milliken, I don't believe he's on. Judge Moore,
Yes.
Brian Ungst.
Yes,
Brian, your screen is sideways.
I see that. I don't know how to fix it.
Okay. And Dr. Grego.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like this.
You could do it like that, Brian. Yeah.
The whole time.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Beth Houghton,
Yes.
Judith Warren,
Yes.
Laura Brock,
Yes.
Linda Leedy.
Yes.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Board Attorney Colleen Flynn,
Yes.
Lauren Strope,
Yes.
John Gilberto.
Yes.
Okay. Diana Caro,
Yes.
Lynn Delator,
Yes.
Laurie Lewis.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Please mute your device until you are called on to speak. Thank you.
All of the materials for this meeting are posted on JWB's website with the agenda for the meeting, and we recommend that JWB's board members and the public follow the agenda as posted unless we note otherwise. We're now turning to the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some of the ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure that we have accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each item on the agenda, and after staff has presented the item, the chair will entertain questions by members. Please physically raise your hand if you are in the Zoom webinar to be recognized. If you are on a telephone conference, please press *9 so the moderator may unmute your line. We will have public comment before the vote on each action and during the open agenda at the end. Please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom webinar or press *9 if you are on a telephone to be recognized to speak. The moderator will call on each person by name, or if on telephone, the last 4 digits of the call-in number, and we, as always, allow 3 minutes for comment. Finally, each vote will be taken as a roll call vote. Further, for all participants, board members, staff, and the public, please remember to mute your phone or device when you're not speaking. And please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. With that, I will turn the meeting over to Mr. McCabe, JWB Finance Committee Chair, to conduct the Finance Committee meeting to handle some ministerial matters. And then Ms. Ralston, JWB Board Chair, will commence with our regular JWB Board meeting.
All right, thank you. I'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order. We met on April 27th. The minutes have been posted. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the April 27th meeting by Mr. Butler?
Make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, the minutes are approved. I don't think there's any other business, so the Finance Committee meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. At this point, we'll open up the call to order for the Juvenile Welfare Board meeting of Thursday, May 14th. And I'll be calling for a motion first to approve the consent agenda items as posted.
Motion to approve. Mike Grego.
Thank you, Dr. Grego. Second, please.
Second, Judge Moore.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 For those of you following along with the agenda, we're going now to action item number 3, A, and it will be to select the September 2020 trim hearings and board meeting date. And for that presentation, I'll turn it over to Laura Brock.
Good morning. We need to look at the dates to be able to select that for the trim hearings. So the first public hearing to adopt the tentative budget and millage rate must be held between September 3rd and September 18th, 2020, which is at least 10 days after the property appraisal mails the trim notices. In accordance with Florida statutes, that meeting must be held after 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, or any time on Saturday. We have looked at the schedule for the school board and the county commission, and we have also looked at the calendar to identify any holidays or religious observations during the month of September. We have selected 4 different options for those dates for the tentative hearings and the final hearings, and those are listed on your agenda. And I will turn it over to Mrs. Ralston for any discussion on the dates.
For the board members, I've already spoken to staff that I am actually available for all 4 options. However, if truth be told, my preference would be option number 2, but I open up for discussion to see if we can land on one of the options that accommodates the most board members. How about some discussion on this?
This is Judge Moore. Your option number 2, due to COVID, we are backed up and I will be in trial all of those days. DCF is kicking the state attorney's butt and they're kicking my butt. So I won't make any of those days. I have termination trials. So sorry on option 2.
Judge Moore, are there any of the other options that seem to work better for you and your schedule?
As long as they're not Wednesdays. Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays are my trial days for dependency. Sorry.
Why don't you suggest the options that do work for you, and it would be a good place for the others to respond?
If possible, if everyone could consider option 3, otherwise I would take something off my calendar for option 1.
Dr. Grego, do any of those work better for you? 3 or 1?
Either one. I think the 3rd probably on a Thursday would be best.
Okay.
This is in the evening though, right? Yeah. I think either one of those would work. I think I have our final hearing, I believe, on the 8th. And so if you've checked it, I appreciate it. And so if you've avoided that, I think ours is Tuesday the 8th.
So right now we have option number 3 as an option. That seems to work. How about some other discussion?
3 or 1. But if for the judge 3 is better, then that's good.
Either one works for me.
Are we close enough to call for a motion?
I move to approve whatever Dr. Grego and Judge Moore like.
Okay, I have a motion to accept option number 3 for the trim hearing.
Second.
Second, Judge Moore, thank you. Laura Peel, do we have any requests for public comment?
There is no public comment.
Before we go for the roll call vote, Beth Houghton, I realize that we've selected the trim hearing meetings. Should we select one of those dates, either the 15th or the 29th, to host our board meeting before we can amend the motion before we call for the vote?
That would be helpful. And I think my suggestion would be the 15th. It just puts us closer to the time of the month that we typically meet. Near, I don't know whether it's the second week, but it's close to the second week. So
That's right. So I'll go back to Bernie McCabe and ask if he can amend his motion to include the 15th and the 29th, with the 15th being the date of the board meeting prior to the trim hearing. Are you good with that, Mr. McCabe?
I am, but the board meeting, I assume you want it to be in the afternoon at 3 or 3:30 before the trim hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will so amend.
Judge Moore?
Second.
Having no public comment, Laura Peel, please go for the roll call vote, please.
Yes, as I call your name, please state your vote. Susan Ralston,
Yes.
Rick Butler,
You're muted, Rick.
I unmuted you.
Oh, yes.
Bernie McCabe,
Aye.
Commissioner Seal,
Yes.
Chief Milliken,
Yes.
Judge Moore,
Yes.
Brian Ongst,
Yes.
and Dr. Grego.
Yes.
Thank you.
For those of you following the agenda, we're action item number 3B. It will be the accept the fiscal year 19 audited financial statements. And once again, I'll turn it back to Laura Brock to introduce our presenter.
Thank you. We are delighted to have today the auditors to discuss the results of the financial audit. The audit was completed for the year ended September 30, 2019, and this was the first year that we completed a comprehensive annual financial report, which is a little more involved than the normal financial audit we've had in the past. It includes a transmittal letter and 10 years worth of statistical data. So there was quite a bit of work that was put into putting the financials together. The audit is posted on our JWB website, and we are required under the special act of the state statute to have an audit. And we file our audit with Pinellas County as well as the state of Florida. In addition to the audited financial statements, we're also required to submit annually to the Auditor General the annual financial report, and we have done that. So at this time, I will call on John Gibraltar and Lauren Strope for a presentation, and I will pull that up. And I will turn it over to them.
Good morning. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Great. This is John Gilberto. I hope you're all doing well this morning. I am the partner on the engagement, and Lauren Strope, the senior manager, is also with me. And we have a very short presentation for you today to kind of highlight the results of your audit. We had a very detailed meeting of the timing, the nature, and extent of what went into the audit with your audit committee, and we'd like to thank them very much for their time and attention during that presentation. They had good questions, and we gave a complete depth of our audit process to them and the results of that. So today for you, we have a summary, a high-level presentation that we'll go right into, and we'll start on page 1 of the presentation. We have completed our audit of the financial statements of JWB for the year ended September 30th, 2019, and have issued our reports thereon. This presentation goes into our required communication to you, those charged with governance. And I'm going to turn it over to Lauren on the next page to go through a little bit about what our opinions were, and then a little bit about what the CAFR is, and that's a new document that you had this year, and any changes that you'll see in that CAFR compared to the prior year. So with that, thank you, and I will turn it over to Lauren.
Good morning. In order to complete the audit, we actually issued 4 different reports. The first is the audit opinion, or that of generally accepted auditing standards. And that we issued an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we as your external auditors can give to JWB. And what that basically says is that your financial statements are free from any sort of material error. The next report that we issue is the report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance. That is also known as the Yellow Book report or the GAST report, Government Auditing Standards report. And that would disclose any sort of material weakness in internal controls or significant deficiencies in internal controls. We did not have any of those, so those are not disclosed in that report. So it's a clean report that you received. The third is the management letter, which is required by the Auditor General of the state of Florida. We issued a no comment letter this year. And what that means is we were able to use the standard template. If we had to change that template at all, it would be because we found something or there was an issue or an error in the financial statement. So again, a great opinion to have a no comment there. The fourth and final report that we issue is also required by the Florida Auditor General, and that is the report on compliance with local government investment policies. And for that one, we issued an unmodified report, which again is the highest level of assurance that we can provide. And it essentially says that we did not know anything that was out of compliance with the investment policies prescribed by the state of Florida. Next slide, please, Laura. If you're ever curious as to how the accounting policies work at JWB, you can find all of that information in footnote 2 to the financial statements. We did find that they are in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America and consistent with industry practices and standards. So there was nothing that JWB is doing in its accounting policies that is out of line with anything that we are seeing across the board. I did want to point out that year over year, I come up and I talk to you guys, and the last couple of times there has been some big changes for pension, for various accounting policies that were adopted. And this year there were no new ones required by GASB to be adopted. So you do have in your basic financial statements an apples to apples comparison with the prior year. As Laura mentioned, you did issue a comprehensive annual financial report this year. That is prescribed by the GFOA. And what they say you need to have in there is that transmittal letter, an introductory section, and that 10 years of statistical data that goes along with it. So I do want to really commend management because a lot of work went into pulling that together to ensure that that was ready to go. And that has to be issued by March 31st of each year in order to be considered by the GFOA for the Excellence in Financial Reporting certificate. So we're really hoping that that one goes through. And then if you switch to the next slide, Laura. At this time, that ends our presentation, but I did want to point out that we serve at the pleasure of the board, not just now, not just when we're talking to the audit committee, not just when we're out doing the audit, but really year round. So if there are any questions whatsoever that come up during the year, we don't charge for phone calls, so please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And at this time, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
No questions from us, Mrs. Ralston?
Right, I want to make sure that the board has an opportunity to ask any questions or comments before we ask for a motion. Hearing none, I'll call for a motion to approve the financial fiscal year 19 audited financial statements as presented.
So moved. This is Brian.
Thank you. Second?
A second. Jim?
Thank you. Laura Peel, do we have any public comment on this topic?
We do not have any public comment.
Would you proceed with a roll call vote?
I certainly will. As I call your name, please state your vote. Susan Ralston.
Approved.
Rick Butler.
Aye.
Bernie McCabe.
Aye.
Commissioner Seal.
Yes.
Judge Moore.
Yes.
Chief Milliken.
Yes.
Brian Ongst.
Yes.
And Dr. Grego.
Yes.
Thank you.
If you're following along with the agenda, will be item number 3C, which is to ratify financial committee recommendations from the April 27th, 2020 meeting. Mr. McCabe, before we proceed with going through those 4 items, do you have any opening comments? And Commissioner Seal, I see your hand is raised.
I apologize, but I'm going to have to exit the meeting. We have a county commission meeting at 9:30, and I did let Beth Cotton know of that. So my executive assistant is going to try to listen in on the rest of the meeting. Thank you all. Sorry.
Mr. McCabe, do you have any opening comments before we go through the 4 items?
No, I do not.
Okay, then we'll take them one at a time. Item number 1, which is a budget amendment and sole source award to YMCA of the Suncoast. And I'll turn that over to Laura Brock for presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Ralston. So we are here to present an approval for the budget amendment and sole source award to the YMCA of Suncoast for the middle school academies at Largo and Tarpon Springs. To briefly summarize, the middle school academies have been one of JWB's strategic focus areas under the school success. Currently, we fund 7 middle school academies in Pinellas County. And at the November 2019 Finance Committee meeting, there was a discussion of the strategy of adding 3 additional sites in the Azalea, Largo, and Tarpon Springs area. The board agreed to invest $800,000 in fiscal 20 and primarily in the mid and North County areas. And they looked at the C, D, and F schools, which are considered the high need schools. And of course, they showed up in our high-risk areas. The Finance Committee recommended that we sole source the Largo and Tarpon Springs program to the YMCA of Suncoast and to issue an RFP for the Azalea Middle School Academy. The prorated recommended award amount for fiscal 20, which would be June 1, 2020 through September 30, 2020, was $32,243 to the Largo Middle School Academy, $30,067 to Tarpon Springs, for a total of $62,310, thereby reducing the budgeted amount of $800,000 to $737,690. The anticipated annualized award amount for fiscal year 21 would be $232,580 for Largo, $200,156 for Tarpon Springs, for a total of $432,736. The RFP timeline for the Azalea Middle School Academies has been revised due to COVID-19. Originally scheduled interviews were for March 24th, 2020, and those were scheduled for the Boys and Girls Club of the Suncoast and the YMCA of Greater St. Petersburg. As we are aware, Pinellas County Emergency Management declared a disaster on March 13th, 2020, and as a result, the timeline was revised for the interviews to be held on May 22nd, 2020. On May 5th of 2020, the YMCA of Greater St. Petersburg notified JWB of their desire to withdraw their proposal due to time constraints caused by the COVID-19. JWB has accepted the withdrawal and will interview the Boys and Girls Club of the Suncoast on May 22nd, 2020, their scheduled date. In this case, we will be able to be up and running and scheduled and keep in line with our time frame. This will be a Zoom meeting, and the evaluation committee meeting will be held later that date. I'll turn it back over to you, Mrs. Ralston, for any comments or questions.
I'll open it up to the board at this moment. At this time, any of the board members that have questions or comments before we call for a motion?
Let me just reiterate why we recommend sole sourcing the first 2. Is because that the YMCA of the Suncoast already had established programs at those 2 middle schools, so we would not have to go back and reinvent the wheel.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ralston, Dr. Grego has his hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't see him. Dr. Grego?
Yes, yeah, I think that's really wise that they already have programs there. So using that as a sole source, I think is a smart thing. Are these programs going to be geared towards the summer as we approach it, or what's the timeline? Is it a start time once the RFP is, or the sole source for, like, say, Largo Middle or Tarpon. Is any of this happening in the summer?
Let me respond to that. None of it is happening in the summer, unfortunately. With the original timeline, we would have gotten through the procurement process so that the programs could have been up and going for the fall semester. Unfortunately, with the delay, that's not going to happen until the second semester. So none of them will impact the summer.
When you say second semester, you're talking about next January of 2021?
Correct.
Wow.
I know.
I was just on the phone with all of these folks 2 days ago, and we're looking at plans of opening programs in our schools this summer. That's why I was excited about this, thinking that we were also going to be able to have wraparound or daycare services for people who really need it. So it's just ironic that the St. Pete pulled out, because he was one that we're looking at in our summer bridge program, which will be remote. They are still wanting to be in 37 sites, so we're providing them like a cafeteria, something that we're cleaning every day, because they are conducting summer camps. So I was kind of hoping that this would be taking place at least by the fall, but you're saying it's next January 2021.
It is. We would have loved to have seen it occur earlier as well. And I'm glad to hear, on a quite separate issue, I'm glad to hear that you're working to provide school space for some of that wrap program around your bridge, your more virtual bridge program. That's been a great concern to us. So that's great.
Yeah, it's a great concern to everybody in terms of that. It's just whether it's a safe thing to do, and it's their program. So we're going to take a look at it at 37 sites and see how the population is. And so if students are going there, they're going to have to manage those. So we'll work well together. But especially at Azalea, it would be a really good. So the Boys and Girls Club, that's the same for the RFP. You're looking at a start time of next January 2021.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Now let me ask if Judith is on the line. Did I misspeak relative to the sole sourcing relative to the two YMCA Suncoast programs? Are they going to be up and running in the fall?
I think because they've already been there and providing services, then the potential for them to get up and running earlier is definitely there. I think Azalea may take a little bit more time because they have to look at recruitment of students and hiring and the other administrative pieces.
And the procurement process will take a little longer. So my apology for misspeaking.
No, that's okay.
Thank you. I had my hand raised because that was my question. If we could be a little bit more nimble with the sole source for Largo and Tarpon Springs Middle, and if we can get those up and running as quickly as possible, maybe we can dedicate the staff time needed to fast forward Boys and Girls Club as quickly as we can to get those resources down to Dr. Grego and Azalea Middle School, because again, we know the need is there. I see your hand up, Judith.
I just want to give confirmation that my team confirmed that we are on target for August for Tarpon and Largo.
That's what I thought. Yeah. That's what I thought, because I talked to Scott about, so, okay. Thank you.
Very good. Excellent. Do we have any other questions or comments? Seeing no hands, I'll call for a motion for approval of this action item.
So
Motion
moved.
to approve. Okay. Second.
Mr. Longst and seconded by Dr. Grego. Any public comment, Laura Peel, on this topic?
At this time, there's no public comment.
Please proceed with the roll call vote.
As I call your name, please state your vote. Susan Ralston.
Approved.
Rick Butler.
Yes.
Bernie McCabe.
Aye.
Commissioner Seal,
Yeah.
She left the meeting.
You left the meeting.
thank you. Chief Milliken,
Yes.
Judge Moore,
Yes.
Brian Ongst,
Yes.
Dr. Grego.
Yes.
Thank you.
This motion carries. Item 3C, number 2, is ratification of CEO approvals of contracts for emergency funding and emergency purchases as of April 14th, 2020. Back to you, Laura Brock, for the presentation.
Thank you. As you know, the Pinellas County Emergency Management declared a disaster on March 13th, 2020, and the board has delegated authority to the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, under our board policy section 5-6, financial and emergency response. This is where the CEO can approve contracts for emergency funding from the JWB contingency budget to meet urgent needs. The CEO is to report the use of the contingency budget to the board and to seek ratification. The current contingency budget is at $500,000, and there's a schedule included in your packet which identifies the items totaling $417,462 that have been spent out of the contingency budget. And briefly, those include $200,000 to GA Foods, which is a one-time increase for funded food program. And these items are all due to COVID-19. $50,000 to the James G. Scott to provide cleanup and repair for the multiplex building owned by CASA. $53,462 for the Directions of Mental Health. Again, a one-time increase to assist with technology and upgrades for the telehealth services. $14,000 to Safety Harbor Neighborhood Family Center to replenish their food stock due to a fundraiser that could not be held. And $100,000 to the St. Petersburg Free Clinic to acquire bulk food purchases for distribution through the St. Pete Free Clinic, the Shepherd Center, RCS Food Pantry, and the Florida Dream Center. This brings the contingency budget down to $82,538. In addition, under the JWB Board Policy Section 6, under Purchasing and Contracting, under paragraph H, it states that the CEO may make or authorize others to make emergency purchases of goods and services in the event of a disruption of essential operations or where there exists a threat to the public health, welfare, and safety. Emergency purchases that exceed $50,000 are required to be reported to the board. Again, you have a schedule of those items which are included in your packet. And some of those pertain to those emergency purchases as well. Jim Scott, GA Foods, the Tampa Bay Network to End Hunger contract. And all of these items we present to you in order to get ratification for these emergency funding. And Mrs. Ralston, I will turn that back over to you.
At this point, any questions or comments to Laura Brock on this topic, or Beth? Not seeing any hands unless I'm missing them. All right, let's call for a motion for ratification, please. Do we have a motion?
So
I'll move
moved.
it.
Second.
Second.
I hear Mr. McCabe motioned and a second by Brian Ongst. At this point, are there any requests for public comment?
There are no requests for public comment.
Please proceed with the roll call vote.
As I call your name, please state your vote. Susan Ralston,
Approved.
Rick Butler,
Aye.
Bernie McCabe,
Aye.
Chief Milliken,
Yes.
Judge Moore,
Yes.
Brian Ongst,
Yes.
Dr. Grego.
Yes.
Thank you.
This motion carries. 3C, number 3. Number 3 is approve a 60-day extension of emergency response compensation period. Laura Brock.
Thank you. The emergency response policy allows JWB to continue to fund previously approved programs for a period of at least 60 days after Pinellas County Emergency Management declared a disaster. That 60-day period expired on May 12th, 2020, and we are looking to extend that emergency compensation period for an additional 60 days. Mrs. Ralston.
Any questions, comments?
Move approval. This is Bernie.
Second, this is Judge Moore.
Thank you, Judge Moore, for the second. Any requests for public comment?
There are no requests for public comment at this time.
Please proceed with the roll call vote.
As I call your name, please state your vote. Susan Ralston,
Yes.
Rick Butler,
Rick.
I'm gonna
You're
unmute
muted.
him. Rick Butler,
Yes.
Bernie McCabe,
Aye.
Chief Milliken,
Yes.
Judge Moore,
Yes.
Brian Ongst,
Yes.
Dr. Grego.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. The final one is item 3C, number 4, approve a budget amendment to increase contingency budget. Back to you, Laura Brock.
Thank you. As mentioned earlier, we do have a contingency budget, which currently is at $500,000. We discussed earlier that the emergency funding that was spent out of that contingency budget, which leaves us a balance of $82,538. This budget amendment that we are requesting is to transfer an additional $500,000 to the contingency budget and to take that out of the future programming budget. That will leave our future programming budget at $301,141. We were hoping that we'd be able to use this fund if necessary for any additional emergency requests or items that we can assist in the community for public health. Mrs. Ralston.
Comments, questions? Chief Milligan?
Under this part, I was wondering, how is the Florida Dream Center? Are they a part of this? Is this where they are included at, or have we talked to them? I know they feed about several, numerous thousands of kids every year, or every day rather. I'm sorry, and I don't know if they're part of what we're doing or what.
I can respond to that. The Dream Center have not historically been one of our funded agencies. However, they do very good work in Lillman. And one of the ways in which we've been able to provide them, well, both of the food purchases that we talked about provided them some food, certainly not all the food that they acquired or needed, but as we've looked at any food purchases that we do, whether through GA Foods or whether through bulk purchases, we have spread those out across the county to include the Shepherd Center in Tarpon Springs, RCS in Clearwater, the Dream Center, and also St. Pete Free Clinic as sort of the major hubs, because each one of them, to the Dream Center, I will say, not only do they distribute food directly, but they also provide food to other smaller pantries, as is true with the others.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing no hands, I'll call for a motion to approve.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Milliken.
Second, Judge Moore.
Thank you. Any requests for public comment?
There are no requests for public comment.
Thank you, Laura. Would you proceed with the roll call vote?
Yes, I will. As I call your name, please state your vote. Susan Ralston,
Approved.
Rick Butler, Bernie McCabe,
Aye.
Chief Milliken,
Yes.
Judge Moore,
Approved.
Brian Ongst,
Yes.
Dr. Grego.
Yes.
Thank you.
This motion carries. Very good. We're moving on to item 4 on the agenda, which is discussion item, and I will refer to Beth for the Grants Management Cloud Solution Cooperative Purchase. That's a mouthful.
Yes,
Off
it
to
is.
you, Beth Houghton.
This is not an item for approval at this point. I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of where we stood on an item that we had not budgeted for the current year. We don't expect that it will have significant impact on the budget this year, but sometime before the end of the year, we will be coming back asking for approval of a contract. Our core information system that really runs our business has been a single integrated system called GEMS. Some will remember predecessors to GEMS, but it, besides gathering or being the first entry point for participant data from all of our participating agencies, it also serves as the financial side to manage the budgets of each of these entities that we fund. It is where agencies would submit their budgets, submit their reimbursements. We would analyze those and authorize those for payment and so on. The fact of the matter is there has been significant dissatisfaction with the system for some time for a variety of dissatisfactions, but both by our participants who use it on the one side and by our staff on the other. During this last, I will say, 4 months, it preceded the COVID excitement, it became clear that we also had concerns about the financial stability of the company that provides this solution. And so while we would have put this on next year's body of work for procurement, we felt it prudent to move this up as quickly as possible with a company that is giving us significant clues that their financial stability isn't what we would want it to be. So this is just again kind of a heads up that we are in the process of looking at replacement solutions. As it turns out, there is not a single solution that works well. We are dividing it into the financial portion and the participant data portion of the program. And we are fortunate that the best candidates for the financial management side of this have already gone through various Florida procurements and are such that we can piggyback off of other procurements. So we do not need to go through the entire RFP process. Having said that, we are still going through all of the sorts of due diligence you would expect relative to selecting the best program, requests for quotes for our particular situation, and so on. And so we are midway through that process with the hope that we can select a system and put it into place probably this fall. I don't expect the expenditures during this fiscal year to be particularly significant. And in fact, there is IT operating budget that would cover that. So you're not going to see any budget amendment or budget action required of you. But it is just significant enough that I wanted you to be aware.
Thank you. And I just want to confirm that I've had Beth and staff confirm that they are communicating with funded agencies, or a handful of them, who are a part of and knowledgeable of what's happening with this due process. Correct? I see nodding of the head.
Yes.
I think that's important.
Yes, and in particular, when we get to choosing a selection, a selected product, we want to have their input on what it means to be an agency using these systems, because they actively use them to transmit information to us.
Thank you. Item number 5 will be a presentation from Beth on the Juvenile Welfare Board response to COVID-19 crisis and the reopening plan. And before I turn it over, I think Beth and I started to speak back in March on a regular basis. I know Beth has put 2 Juvenile Welfare Board communications out to let all of the board members know what was happening as quick as she could. But I will publicly thank Beth and the staff at JWB for responding so quickly. And again, staying in close contact with me to know and to seek some advice. But I am just overjoyed about, in a terrible situation, challenging situation, how it was handled. So with that, I'll turn it over to Beth for her presentation on the last 8 weeks.
It seems like so much longer, I'm sure, to many on this call. It seemed appropriate that I give you an overview of our response to the crisis, both internally as well as how we've worked within the community and what our thoughts are regarding moving forward. Before any of the governor's orders, we were meeting early in March to create a response plan. We completed, most of it was done, but we completed an IT collaboration platform. We had all but the last piece done and trained, so that really our staff could pick up their laptops, go home and be as productive as they were in the office. We did things like implementing a voluntary temporary telecommuting policy, and we assured that we could make payments remotely and all of the things that we would need to do. So all of those things happened before the governor's order went into place. And in that interim, from the time we were all aware of the coronavirus to the time that we left the office, we were doing things like putting up the stop sign that you see to tell people not to enter the offices at all if they had certain symptoms and so on. And we were heightening disinfectant, we were heightening social distancing even before I think the term was coined. During this time, since the executive order and so on, a primary focus has been to support our funded agencies. And we've done that in a variety of ways, really from day one. We've hosted regular conference calls by program type. So every week, there are conference calls that include out of school providers or mental health providers or other groups where we find out what it is that they're doing, what their concerns are, ways in which we can assist them, ways in which they can assist each other. Often a lot of what's gone on is finding out one agency has some very helpful information that is helpful to another or everybody. We've immediately done one of two things, depending on what kind of information it is. We've posted a great deal on our website that were common resources that could be used by anyone, whether one of our funded agencies or not. And we've also sent back out to all of the participants on any given phone calls, things like, here are the updated locations of food pantries for this week, which have changed as we've gone along. So we've shared timely resources in a variety of ways. We have been very intentional about being flexible regarding budget amendments in response to the crisis. So there, for instance, are certain positions and people and programs that couldn't fulfill the initially budgeted purpose because, let's say, for instance, that activity went on in the schools and the schools were working virtually and not on site. And so, but there were other needs that were peaking, and we were able to move people over. Agencies sometimes had those ideas, sometimes we had those ideas, but we've been very flexible relative to those budget amendments to help us move already budgeted resources to where they could be most helpful in the current environment. Needless to say, as everybody has, we've stressed safe service continuation. We have been supportive of telehealth, telephonic visits, video conferencing, and I would want to give a shout out to our agencies who, without any urging from us, by and large, all pivoted on a dime to call their patients or be in touch with their students or see how they could be of assistance to the participants in their programs telephonically or through video conference. In some cases, the agencies needed some budget amendments, or in one case, some additional funds in order to ramp up huge portions of their workforce to be, from an IT perspective, capable of doing that. And we were very quick in responding to those needs, so that the key thing is that the services got to the families and children who needed them. We realized that data collection was going to be very different, where, you know, as an example, in programs where we would look at participation and it was in person, obviously that wasn't going to occur. For a variety of participants, we require written consents. Well, that was much more difficult to do, and we found workarounds for that. So in every case, we could meet the spirit of what we were trying to do, but do it in a different way. We did that. The only JWB activity that has really not occurred in the same way is on-site program monitoring. We have been very in touch with our programs, but because of COVID concerns, we have not gone out and visited program sites. As to our own staff, they have been amazingly productive and worked remotely. Our IT capacity was just all but perfect before we started, and then they made the last. We got trained literally the week before we went out on the last piece of our virtual platform. And so it is actually the case that with our laptops that we all grabbed and took home, we can do everything from an IT perspective, document retention, document recovery, anything that we could have done in the office. Also supports certainly virtual collaboration in a whole variety of ways, including video conferencing, but all the other ways of sharing documents and co-editing documents and that sort of thing. And I can't say enough about our IT group in the fact that they did all of this well in advance of COVID. So this part was very seamless to us. We have really been a hub to connect resources and share information. I mentioned this in a way before. We have been in touch not only with our own agencies who then are in touch with their families and the people they serve, but we have stayed on the county's emergency operation calls. So 2 or 3 of us always hear what's going on there. In fact, Judith led a leadership group, one of the subgroups of that emergency operations center, which related to community wellness, and as always did a stellar job in doing that. We have stayed in contact with the Department of Health, with the Pinellas County Schools, the Pinellas County response operations, and as appropriate have been passing that key information onto our agencies and others. We stayed in contact with each other first doing it literally on a daily basis, and then we moved to a weekly basis to sort of sustain ourselves. But and in this process, we have also worked to get the word out within the press, not only about the work that the Juvenile Welfare Board is doing, but important work that the community needs to be focused on. So, for instance, we have pushed out stories relative to food and the need for food, likewise about domestic violence and the anticipated and now, as we would expect, seen increases in domestic violence. But we were talking about those issues and pushing out PR about those issues before everybody else was talking about them, and that's been helpful. And similarly, we were talking 2 and 3 and 4 weeks ago about how is this economy going to open back up without adequate childcare. And so we are trying to stay ahead of the immediate issues and work with our partners and with other community organizations and governmental organizations to plan and stay ahead of those things to the extent we can. Often the greatest value we provide is not the money that we grant, but is our ability to connect. So one of the first clear needs, other than toilet paper, that everybody was finding was food. And so we provided some funding for some pieces of this, and we also provided connectivity that was very valuable. So the school system, their food program is always and has been amazing in immediately standing up break spots, what similar to or essentially the model that they do during the summer, reflecting the fact that kids get often 2 of their meals a day during the school week from schools. And if schools are not in sight, those go away. So we helped create opportunities for locations for break spots, grab and go spots, some of those with our neighborhood family centers who provide excellent locations within high need neighborhoods. They have proven invaluable during this time in a variety of ways. We had been in the early process of working with the Tampa Bay Network to End Hunger, who were developing a Meals on Wheels for Kids pilot. They were looking at the summertime for those kids who could not get out to break spots. And we funded that pilot, and you may have read that Bill Edwards added $100,000 to that program just within the last few days to expand it at least for a period of time. So our role was to help the pilot get up and going, and we will continue our commitment for the pilot, but it is our hope that others will join in to provide ongoing funding for that program. As I mentioned before, we've invested in the 4 food banks or hubs that supply Pinellas food pantries. Needless to say, it is much more effective for the food banks, I'll call it the system, for them to be able to buy things at a wholesale rate than it is for people to go to the grocery store and buy things at retail. And so we have provided in 2 different tranches funding for those 4 organizations that I mentioned before that cover the entire county. We have, I mentioned before, on local news and social media, we essentially invited the rest of the community to help us with this and to donate to those organizations who are so critical all the time, but particularly during this time relative to emergency food services. The community wellness group I mentioned a little bit before. Out of the county's emergency operations center, there were a whole variety of subgroups focusing on different pieces, on the hospitals, on getting PPE to first responders, and on and on. And our piece of it was led by Judith Warren, was to look at the other needs, the wellness needs of childcare, the aging, the Latino community, faith-based groups, putting eyes on and touching, and I use that with quotation marks about it, I guess I should say, the isolated older adults. So while no juvenile welfare board monies were spent on older adults, we were part of this wellness work group that pulled together organizations across the county. We assisted, and the outreach, the Hispanic Outreach Center really stood up to create for Latino families the various and sundry core communications they needed about what they needed to know about COVID and how they should be responding, as well as things that were a little bit lighter. And similarly with faith-based partnerships, connecting those to assess what they were seeing with needs and what they could do to assist those in their care. The Family Service Initiative, we anticipated before it occurred that we were going to see some huge increases in needs with the significant number of people who are unemployed and whose income was otherwise disrupted. And so we looked at the process from phone call to the check cut to somebody, and looked at how we could ramp up that pipeline quickly. So we internally, part of that is internally, we reassigned 2 JWB staff members, at which they cheerfully did. There are 2 folks who did outreach work that really was minimized during this time period because it was more face-to-face work. So they became trained on how to help process requests. We talked to 211 and talked to them about working within their existing budget to create budget amendments that would allow them to increase personnel and handle a higher call volume. We also talked about whether or not we ought to be tweaking what our requirements are and our expectations are of the families that call in. And we made a few key changes. One in particular was that we knew that our students need access to internet, that Spectrum was providing 2 months free of internet, but that did not include folks who had a bad credit history with Spectrum. And so a couple different solutions to that. The school system, along with the Education Foundation, was providing a lot of hotspots out there for those families. One of the ways we assisted was to allow past due debts for internet, which is not typically something that we would do. We typically don't pay for past bills. As you might expect, the FSI rent and utility payments in April 2020 were triple what they were last year for the same month. That trend is now slowing a bit due to the county's COVID CARES funds that come from the federal government but administered by the county. They have created a very significant direct support infrastructure through 211. They have added county staff to that, but needless to say, that's a lot to ramp up in a very short period of time. So because the monies for each person tend to be higher, up to $4,000 in the COVID CARES funds, we expected, and it has occurred, that the FSI requests have gone down a bit. We expect that when, and we don't know when, but when the COVID CARES program goes away, that FSI dollar requirements will go up. So what we've done, we're talking about in large part, certainly as to the families and children, the same people. So the 211 staff that typically process FSI requests are now processing COVID CARES fund requests. And we are continuing to look at other ways in which we can help push those federal dollars out to get them to the individuals who need them. There's a lot of documentation required. There's, scanning and sending in documents. It's even though the money's there, it's not as easy to get it through the process as one would like. And so we're also talking with our FSI navigators, folks with PIMS and with Gulf Coast community, who are exemplary at knowing how to access documents and then get them scanned and in to help some of our families. And we haven't quite decided what the very best way to do that is, but by Monday, I expect we will have that figured out. We've already talked about these contingency fund budgets or investments, so I won't, repeat that. This was a very nice thank you we received from CASA for a relatively small amount of money. It was a not to exceed 50,000, but I don't think it'll be over 40,000. We were able to get the repair and cleaning of a 7-plex back up to par and to habitability, a building that CASA already owned, and it meant that families could immediately move in, and that expanded their capacity, CASA's capacity, at a time when, on the one hand, you wanted to have fewer people in the same limited space, but we all knew that once people kind of got out of their homes a little bit more, we were going to see significantly more domestic violence being reported. And so this was a very quick way to help them expand capacity very quickly. Besides all of the unusual COVID-related things, I would just point out we've gotten all the normal stuff done too. Internally, all the fiscal year 21 budgets have been submitted. You are at a board meeting, so we have managed that. Annual performance monitoring reports from the prior year were all completed. We have onboarded a few staff, and a few staff exits have occurred. Payments are being made, procurements are underway. Instead of having all of the staff in the Edmonds Neary room for staff meetings, we now have virtual town hall meetings. I think I just led the 5th one a few days ago, so that people hear from me and hear what's going on across the agency. And we have kept up with things like the Family First Corona Response Act and the emergency paid sick leave. We have all of those policies in place, and as I mentioned before, have generated news stories that are positive stories, both about the work of the JWB as well as about our agencies and prompting people to action. We've tried to do some fun things. We now have staff who have been quarantined with their dogs, which may not be so bad, but they've also been quarantined in essence with their spouses, who may also be trying to work from home. They have become virtual teachers and everything else. So within the limitations of video conferencing and so on, we've done things like sending off staff with fun, celebrating birthdays, recognizing work anniversaries, online staff baby photo contest, and all of those other things. We have tried to use video conferencing over teleconferencing where we could, so that people could see each other's faces. and remain connected and feeling connected. As we monitor both locally and across the country how various kinds of organizations are looking at reopening, it has seemed pretty clear to me that those organizations who can work effectively on a remote basis are often making that decision to stay closed so that they don't add to the community risk of spread. And one way or the other, the reopening of the JWB office will be slow, intentional, data-driven. None of us has a crystal ball relative to knowing if there will be resurgences, when there will be resurgences, how difficult they will be. But we intend to be one of the last open because we can be. So needless to say, large meetings that we often have been canceled. We are allowing, as of this week, staff to return to the office on a limited basis, just to do those things that are unwieldy to do at home. So printing large documents or copying or scanning or those kinds of things. We have already gone through the building and we have plans for taking extra precautions to disinfect things, to reconfigure every room to be clear about how many people should be in any given room, so that when we return, whether it's on a limited basis or a fuller basis, we've already thought through what that will be. We know that Edmonds Neary for board days is absolutely packed, the absolute opposite of social distancing. So we're already working to prepare conference room 105 for a sound feed and maybe a video feed so that individuals can listen and see the board meetings from just the room down the hall. And let's see. Just so you're aware of the kinds of issues that I remain concerned about, and that other than the things that we are continuing to do, we know that it's going to be very difficult for the economy to get back up and going without adequate childcare, youth care, and summer programming. Parents have come to expect and count on summer camps, summer programs, and yet at the same time, for a variety of reasons, the capacity in child care organizations has dropped significantly. In some cases, because they're organizations, the small, medium-sized organizations who were on the edge already perhaps and just closed and may never reopen. The difficulty in getting childcare workers back to work. And it is hard work for not a lot of pay. So that's going to be difficult. We also know that given both physical distancing and the number of individuals who can be in any given room, our ongoing programs in the same space with the same staff will have a much lower number of kids in their care. And we're right now trying to assess, along with the Early Learning Coalition, what that capacity is. So we're going to have, as a community, we're going to have some real issues of people needing to return to work, having been used to certain providers being available to them, and the list will already be full. There won't be adequate capacity. So as earlier was discussed just in passing with Dr. Grego, it's certainly our hope that there would be some locations at schools that might be open because physical capacity is at least one of those limiting factors. We know that parents are tired. They have been dealing with their kids at home, often trying to simultaneously work remotely, sometimes be that I will say proctor, not teacher, but at least proctor, sometimes tutor teacher, in keeping their kids up to speed with their schoolwork. It's a lot to process all at one time, and often they are responsible for caring for an elderly parent, and so they're dealing with all sides of that. We, as well as the school system, I know, are worried about the COVID slide, akin to the summer slide. The fact that while the virtual platforms and the virtual teaching that the school system has done has been absolutely amazing, we know that there are many families who were not as equipped as others, either from a technological perspective or a physical perspective and a discipline perspective, to provide the support for their kids to keep up with the virtual learning that was going on. And I know that Dr. Grego is totally tuned into that, and we will be working around him to try to find ways to both provide more childcare capacity this summer, as well as support the virtual summer bridge that the school system is planning to roll out. I worry about the rise in domestic violence and the fact that as children begin to return to centers or to be seen by others, that we're going to find out that a lot has gone on over this last 8 weeks that nobody had eyes on. And that whole system of care is going to need to respond to that. So those are some of the areas I worry about in the next weeks. Some of the issues of the first weeks haven't gone away. While the food supply for our food banks is better, and some individuals have gotten a stimulus check, and some individuals have gotten unemployment payments, and some individuals will qualify for the COVID CARES monies that are coming from the feds through the county. That food needs will still be there. I expect them to drop some, but these are I will say, the emerging issues, or the issues that we're really trying to work on right now. I wanted to make sure I give a huge shout out to our staff who are dealing with all of these issues themselves as individuals, and yet have been incredibly effective in working through these issues and done amazing things. You should be very proud of your JWB staff. And with that, I'll come back to questions if anyone has any questions for me.
All right. I can't thank you enough. Certainly agree with Beth. The staff has been wonderful, and a particular shout out from me is Laura Peel and the work that the technology, I know Beth mentioned it, but we've had several meetings and just consultation to make sure all of the board members were up to speed for the finance meeting and today's board meeting. So again, I'm stalling for a bit to make sure if any other board member has a comment, we'll move on. I don't see any hands, so we'll move on to Chief Milliken.
Yeah. I just want to comment and big shout out to Beth and her staff for everything they've done through the COVID-19 process. I sit on the Pinellas County Rock Calls when we have those, usually Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the amount of work that JWB has done to help our county citizens out across the entire county, from our kids and helping get agencies together for our elderly, is remarkable. You guys have done a fantastic job. Thank you so much for everything you've done.
I just want to second that comment as well. I was going to comment, you guys are doing an excellent job during this COVID situation to not only make sure that your staff is safe, but to also serve the community. And so hats off to you all.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. Moving on, do any of the board members need to pull or desire to pull any of the information items from the agenda? Okay, Then at this point, I'll refer back to Laura Peel to ask her if we have any requests for public comment towards the end of the meeting. Open agenda.
And I do have one hand up. It is Sally Parks, and I'm going to allow her to speak and mute her. It's taking just a moment to unmute.
It looks like her mute is still
Oh,
on.
there we go. Ms. Parks, you may now speak.
Thank you very much. And Madam Chairman and excuse me, the staff and board members of the Juvenile Welfare Board. I'm chair of the 211 board, and I just want to say how much we appreciate the flexibility and the nimbleness of the Juvenile Welfare Board at this time. And I have things that keep me up at night too, Beth, and that is in part that we are just, it's not 8 weeks, it's probably 12 or 16 weeks that we're looking at, because the summer is the busiest time for 211 when parents have children at home. They're running out of wonderful food opportunities that they get through the schools, that of course they're struggling with right now and will continue through the summer, and childcare and all of those items that Beth mentioned. So we'll stay tuned. I think that we'll be able to achieve wonderful things, but the ability of the Juvenile Welfare Board to work with 211 has been fantastic. And I just want to say thank you.
And I don't see any other comment.
Okay, Rick Butler, we have lots of anniversaries. Are you ready for your kudos to them?
And
Okay, now you hear me.
Yes, we do.
Okay, let's start off with March. Deborah Pruitt, 19 years. And I hope everybody's out there in the audience, and you know, we appreciate all that you do for us here. Cheryl Miller, 5 years. And Karen Shack, 2 years. For the month of April, since we missed a month. Joyce Sparrow, 20 years. Jennifer Artiega, 9 years. And Felicia Pisano, 7 years. And Ann Crawford, 6 years. Lorraine Hayes, 4 years. And Joanne DeLernia, 3 years. And I bet I didn't make one mistake. I hope.
Way to go. Congratulations to the staff.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have some tenure out there.
Yes, we do.
All right, as we wind down the meeting, board members, please make note of the June 11th next Juvenile Welfare Board meeting, to be determined about where it will be. And then July 9th, no board meeting in August. And I'm sure you can see the red notation on the agenda. The Cooperman Bow 2020 Kids First Awards Luncheon has been canceled. And at this moment, there's no rescheduling. And before I call for adjournment I see a hand up, Mr. Ongst. Oh, okay. I thought I saw your hand. I just would like to send my regards to anyone, to Bob Dillinger and his family, Beth, via you or anyone else that knows him. On behalf of the board, I just want to send out my regards. And at this moment, I'll call for an adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Meeting adjourned. We'll see y'all real soon. Take care. Be safe.